Good morning everyone. Now we're going to get started with your thumbnail design. So we're creating our Picasso inspired zoomorphic pots, which means that they have an animal influence in some way, shape or form. Now it might be that they start off really quite abstract, you might have some that are really realistic where you're focusing on details, or there might be a combination of both of those things in your design. So what you should have and what you're going to work from is your mood board. So again, you should have a range of, I would say a minimum of 9 photos. Obviously you may have a few more in there. Again, for each design, it might be that you focus on one animal in particular, or it might be, like I said, a combination of a few different animals or different features within there. That is entirely up to you. Now, when we get back in school, we are going to go back to observational drawing, so we will get to that at some stage. But the most important thing for us at the minute is to start our thumbnail designs, to get to our final clay pot design, so that when we are back in school, we will have lots of time to work on our clay design. So you can see here, this is what you should have before we start your clay pot design. So with my 3 thumbnails, you can see that here I have 3 very different ideas. I have annotated what kind of features they have on it. So for example, the shape of this clay pot here, thin top or kind of funnel neck, octopus is going to be wrapped around the whole pot, lots of detail in the face and the little kind of tentacles, and then I wanted a wider base. This one here, I knew I wanted a kind of shorter, wider pot. The mouse handles, or the mouse ears I wanted as handles. These features are going to be 3D, obviously, although they look 2D in the sketch. And then I have, this pot is shaped like a fish body, 3D hidden fins, Picasso inspired painted patterns or scales, which I can then add. And then that's taken me into my final pot design where I've created a side view, a front view, and then an aerial view. This is something that we are going to be doing in our next lesson, so you don't have to worry about this stage at the minute. It is going to be your 3 thumbnail designs that you're going to focus on. Now, they can be 3 very different designs like I have here, or it might be that you want to focus on one kind of animal or fish or bird, but you might have 3 different approaches to that. It could be 3 different pot shapes. It might be that you're focusing in on particular details, maybe if you're looking at textures, you might be looking at form for another. Again, that is entirely up to you, so you can have a little think about that. So the first thing I'm going to get started with is obviously a little plain piece of paper. Now, I had mine portrait, so I had my 3 designs like so, but you can work landscape, that is entirely up to you, particularly if you have slightly longer pots. Again, you can see from the examples in the PowerPoint that there's lots of different ways that you can create your pots. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get started with a rough shape for my pot design. Now, in terms of my inspiration, I am going to start with the flamingo here. So I know that obviously if I'm looking at the flamingo, my pot's going to be that little bit taller. If I wanted to do something like the mouse, I could go a little bit shorter or perhaps a little bit longer. Again, that is something that you can work through while you are sketching. So I'm going to start with the kind of rough shape for my pot. So I know I want it to be obviously a little bit narrower, but taller. So I'm starting with a rough kind of rectangular, I should say, shape here. I then want to make it look 3D, so I want to create form to it. So that's where I'm going to have my rounder bottom, and then I'm going to have a round top. So I'm curving down, so I'm creating that form and shape. At the top, I can then go the opposite way, so I'm creating a little bit of an ellipse at the top. In terms of the actual shape of your pot, it can be really quite simple and just go straight up and down. You might want to have some form to it. So if I wanted the base to be wider, I could come out and then I can go straight up. Again, if you have it a little bit wider at parts, it just gives you a little bit more surface area. And obviously if it helps with your design, so I can have it where it's a little bit wider. This is where I can then start to think about the elements that I want to have in my pot design. So say obviously the kind of prominent feature here is going to be the neck. So say I wanted to come off this side, I'm kind of drawing it opposite. So again, I'm starting really quite loose, almost drawing like a little S curve. Now I actually know that I want this neck to kind of fuse and blend into the rest of my pot. I want the head to come off and be kind of 3D. again, you can obviously spend a lot more time working on your design. You can see I'm starting to add some shape. As you can imagine, this is going to come off of my clay pot and this is going to fuse into this. So I've got quite a traditional shape for my original, and then I've got the kind of head coming off. However, for my next one, I might want to start by sketching again, and maybe go for rectangular shape again, just to give me my base. But I could want my pot to essentially be the whole head itself. Again, obviously you can take your time with your sketch, and then see if the opening I have to make it a pot is in that part of my clay pot. So you can see here that this is the full clay pot, and I could have the opening here. This is the pot itself with an add-on, and then obviously you can come up with a third design. You can then take your time to refine that a little bit more. Again, I'll just show you the previous examples that I have had. You can refine that a little bit more. Now, it might be that your sketches could be really quite stylized and cartoon-like, like my examples here. They could be very realistic. Again, you can see there's lots of different examples on the PowerPoint attached, but you do then want to have annotation for your pot design. And then the very last task that you are going to do, or the planning that you're going to do, is just to write a little www and EBI for yourself. What went well. Again, you're only going to do this for your favourite design. You don't have to do it for every single one, but you can talk about your favourite design and what went well, and then what you could do to improve that potentially as you move forward into your final design.